Welcome back, everyone. Now, if you're done mixing your track, it's time to start looking at the mastering process. And this is, in my experience, one of the most dreaded parts of music production. But before we get into it, there's a few things I would like to say. And first of all, it is that when possible, try to outsource your mastering. There's a lot of great mastering engineers out there. A lot of them are not that expensive. I know a lot of people who can master your track for maybe $50, maybe $100, and a lot of times it's really worth it. On the other hand, you can relax because if your goal is to get into, for example, a Trailer Music library, all your music will be mastered by them before it's released. So if you end up working with, say, again, a Trailer Music publisher, all of your tracks before they are released, they will be mastered by the publisher, or at least the mastering will be sponsored by the publisher. So you will not have to rely on your own mastering skills, and you will not have to pay for every single track you want published by somebody else. So I just want to get that said. Next, I also just want to put out a little disclaimer because I am no mastering engineer and nothing even remotely close to that. So don't consider this an expert's opinion on anything. This is purely just my approach and the things that have been working for me to get my music accepted into Trailer Music libraries, films, other music publishers, and stuff like that. So while this is not any kind of expert course on the topic of mastering, I just want to show you my personal process to like what I do in the mastering stage to make my track sound as good as possible. So, but if you're looking at getting into some kind of more in-depth production and mastering course, I'm happy to tell you that we're currently working on that together with some super talented people. And we're trying to get it up as soon as possible because mixing and mastering is one of the most requested topics by far, mostly because there is so little material out there targeted towards soundtrack and orchestral and trailer music production. So that's gonna come. So don't worry about that. There's gonna be a lot of resources about mixing and mastering your music. So in this course, I'm not a mixing engineer, I'm not a mastering engineer, but this is the stuff that I've been working for me so far, even though it's not the best production in the world. But I want to show you what I do, because if you get to that level as well, I can assure that it's good enough to get your music into libraries, to get it published. Because, as I said, when you get to like a professional level where your music is published, either in a film or in like a music library, often it's gonna be mastered. When it's like stuff like Audio Jungle, you will have to do it yourself. And if you are doing these kind of independent things, or you just want to publish your tracks as a single, or you want to do an album, then I would definitely recommend you outsourcing your mastering, because when it's a bigger project, the mastering and the quality does matter. But if it's just something for fun or a little thing on YouTube, or it's just a demo, or still actually if it's a demo and you want it published by a Trailer Music label and you're submitting it to them, it might pay off to just spend like $50 on getting your track mastered because it's going to leave a great impression. Now, with all that said, there's a lot of things that you should not do on your mastering stage, and I can show you a few of those things and why you should avoid doing those things. So let's jump right into it, and we'll take it from there. So what you see in front of you here is my finished mix. And again, I could have been spending a little bit more time on the mix, but I think it's good enough for now. And if we find any big problems here at the mastering stage, you should always go back to the mixing stage to fix it there, because it's limited how much you can fix at this stage. Now, again, it's super important to get a reference track at the mastering stage just as well as in the mixing stage. So I've been taking the same track as I used as a reference in the mixing videos which is made by Toby Mason, friend of mine, and a great mixer in LA. And I mean, while there's no way I can get my track to sound as good as him, because he's a freaking genius when it comes to both mixing and mastering, but it's a really good reference for the kind of qualities I want my track to kind of have, what as close as possible to it. So we have my track and we have the reference. So the first thing, originally, as I imported this track, it was something like this. Because if you remember at the end of the mixing video or in the mixing chapters of the course, I tell you to leave some headroom for the mastering engineer, which is super important. Now that I imported this, I took up the volume, so it's a little bit closer to... it should not clip. You should not push it too far. If you do like this, it's going to distort and it's going to clip, and that's going to ruin your entire track. But feel free to bring it up a little bit. In Cubase, I guess in most other DAWs as well, there's a function called normalizing, which I sometimes use, maybe not 100%, but I use that to get the track as loud as possible without clipping. So it's not going to clip, but it's going to be as loud as it can without clipping if you turn it to 100%. Now, let me just actually, I don't have a limiter, let me just show you what it sounds like when things are clipping. I'm going to turn it down. You can hear that it starts to distort, and it just doesn't sound good at all. So we want to bring it back down, make sure it's not clipping, and we want to start working with it from here. So the first thing I usually do when I start mastering is to apply some really light compression. And here again, you don't want to apply too much, because a lot of people, me included, in the beginning when they are mastering the track, they want it to sound as loud as possible and as loud as other music they hear. So let me show you like what can happen if you push it too hard in terms of compression. So I'm going to open up this TDR feedback compressor, which is free. I use it in the mixing part as well. And this is really important because how much compression you apply here depends on how much you have already been applying. So make sure to not over compress, because you want to have the dynamics of your track. Like you can see here, you don't want it to become like one wave file without any movement at all. That's going to kill all the dynamic range, which is not good. Now, let me try to find like a preset. Let's say mastering loud. Let's take the ratio like super high. Let's see what happens. Okay, so what I did now is that I pushed the compression super high. So it's really squashing my track, and I put up the makeup volume so it sounds loud. It sounds really loud right now. But what you probably will notice is that it's like pumping, it's just super squashed, and it just doesn't sound good. Listen to this. So even though it sounds loud, louder is not always better, especially when you are killing all the dynamics. So you want to be pretty light when it comes to compression. So again, I'm just going to use the glue preset and work with that and see if I can tweak anything. You can see it just makes it sound a little bit more thick and glued together. There's not a big change in volume, which is also not what we're going for here. We just want to enhance it a little bit, and that's what mastering is about. There's a lot of small steps, nothing too drastic, because any changes you do here, let's say for example with EQ, is going to affect your entire mix. So So you can't just change like small things here anymore. Now, whatever you do is going to affect the entire mix. So if you are not careful here, all the work you've been putting into the mixing stage is just going to go straight down the drain. And that's not something we want. Now, there are a few nice mastering tools you can use. And what I want to do in this video is to not use like the most expensive and hard to get plugins that almost nobody uses. I want to use mostly like free and pretty common tools. So I'm gonna use, for example, this one, which is completely free. I will try to use a lot of the Cubase built-in things, which is not the best, but it's gonna prove my point. And I'll also use a little bit of iZotope Ozone, which is a really famous and popular mastering software. So with a lot of different things you can do. So I'm gonna use that a little bit because a lot of people use this, and it's kind of handy to use, especially when you're a bit new to mastering. It's also easy to completely destroy your track with it, but I will show you a few ways you can use this if you decide to get it. This is the Ozone 5, like a pretty old one. I got it a long time ago. Let's say demo here. I need to put in my iLok key for it. But anyways, so the first thing I do is like apply some light compression. Now let's listen to the reference mix, which I think sound quite a bit louder. So this is the kind of balance and the kind of volume we would aim for, but don't worry too much about volume. There are things that are more important than that. Again, there's no way I'm gonna get it to this level because, again, Toby is a freaking genius. But be careful with the volume, because if you try to push it too loud just for the sake of having your track loud, it's gonna affect a lot of other things like the compression, or it's gonna be clipping. So don't worry too much about it, because say if your track is gonna go to iTunes or Spotify, those services apply. They are changing the signal, like the loudness of your track. So all the tracks in Spotify are playing at the same audio level. So they're like the levels of the tracks in Spotify and iTunes, they are not determined by the master. It's like an algorithm in iTunes and Spotify that changes that, so everything is even. So if you are putting your tracks there, that's going to be fixed there. So don't think the volume is everything. Now, the next thing I want to do, wait, let me just make sure that, because you see at the reference track, this is not the completely finished one, by the way. So what you also want to do is to like take away some of the silence at the beginning of your track, which I've already done here, I think at the mixing stage. You can also fade it in if it starts a little bit too abrupt, but let's move on. Now I want to start slightly working with iZotope. So I'm going to open it and listen to the track while I do some things here.